Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I always thought I knew exactly who was sitting at my table. My name is Russell. For 12 years, I worked as an operations manager for a large shipping company outside Dallas. The job paid well, but it came with long hours, constant deadlines, and occasional travel. I didn't mind. It gave my family a good life. My wife, Linda, and I had been married for 9 years. We had a 7-year-old daughter named Emma. As far as I knew, things were solid. Not perfect, solid. There's a difference. There was one other person who was almost always around, Jacob Turner. I'd known Jacob since I was 23 years old. We met when we were both starting out and stayed friends through promotions, failed businesses, moves, marriages, and everything in between. If I trusted anyone outside my family, it was Jacob. He came to birthdays, holiday dinners, Emma's school events. Sometimes he'd stop by the house just to watch a game or help me with a project in the garage. Emma called him Uncle Jacob, not because he was related to us, because he was that close to the family. Linda got along with him too. The three of us had spent countless evenings sitting around the backyard talking about life while Emma played nearby. To me, Jacob wasn't just a friend. He was a brother. At least, that's what I believed at the time. Our anniversary fell on a Saturday that year. I booked a table at one of the nicest restaurants in the city 2 weeks ahead of time. Nothing flashy, just a place Linda always liked. I left work early, picked up the necklace I'd ordered, and met her there at 7. When Linda walked into the restaurant, she looked beautiful. But something felt off immediately. She smiled. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked after we sat down. "Of course," she said. "Why wouldn't it be?" I shrugged. "Just asking." The waiter brought drinks. We talked about Emma, school, and weekend plans. Normal conversation. Too normal, like two people trying hard not to discuss something else. I noticed Linda checking her phone twice during dinner. That wasn't like her. "Waiting for somebody?" I asked. She looked up quickly. "No!" The answer came too fast. I let it go, for the moment. About halfway through dinner, I gave her the gift box. Her eyes widened when she opened it. "Russell, this is expensive. You deserve it." She looked down at the necklace, turning it gently in her hands. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten it exactly right. Then she placed the necklace back in the box and closed it. No smile, no excitement, just silence. I leaned back in my chair. "What is it?" Linda took a slow breath. "Nothing." I shook my head. "Come on. I know you better than that." She looked away toward the restaurant window before turning back to me. Something about her expression felt wrong. Not nervous, not emotional, calculated, like she'd already rehearsed whatever she was about to say. I folded my hands on the table. "Talk to me. Before I do, I need you to let me finish." The moment she said that, every alarm bell in my head started ringing. Still, I nodded. "Fine. Go ahead." A few seconds passed. To break the tension, I smiled. "Listen, it's our anniversary. If there's something you want, just tell me." She remained silent. I continued. "I'm serious. If you want a vacation, we'll take one. If you want to remodel the house, we'll do it. If there's something you've always wanted, name it." Her eyes stayed fixed on me. I laughed lightly. "Linda, you've been my wife for 9 years. You deserve anything. Whatever would make you happy, tell me." For a brief moment, I saw something shift in her face, almost as if she'd been waiting for me to say those exact words. She slowly pushed the gift box aside. Then she looked directly into my eyes and said something that instantly changed the direction of my life. "I want a night with Jacob." For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. Then I realized I had. I stared at her. "My best friend Jacob?" "Yes." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. "Say that again." Linda swallowed. "I want a night with Jacob." The restaurant suddenly felt smaller. I leaned forward. "No, explain it." She crossed her arms. "It's not as simple as it sounds." "It sounds pretty simple to me." Several seconds passed. Finally, she spoke. "I've developed feelings for him." I didn't react, didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the table. I just looked at her. And I need to know if those feelings are real." I shook my head slowly. "So your solution is to sleep with my best friend?" "That's not what I'm saying." "That's exactly what you're saying." She looked frustrated. "Russell, if you would just listen. No, you listen. My voice stayed calm. You're sitting across from your husband on your anniversary and asking for permission to be with another man. A couple at the next table glanced over. I didn't care. Linda lowered her voice. You've been distant for years. I've been working. You were never home enough. I laughed again. There it is. What? The excuse. Her face hardened. I'm trying to be honest. I studied her for a moment. Then something clicked. A feeling. A small detail that suddenly didn't fit. She wasn't nervous enough. She wasn't speaking like someone taking a risk. She was speaking like someone presenting a plan. I leaned closer. How long? Her eyes widened. What? How long has this been going on? Nothing has happened. I didn't believe her. Not for 1 second. Look me in the eye and say that again. She hesitated. That was all I needed. I stood up. Russell, sit down. No, you're making a scene. You should have thought about that before tonight. I placed cash on the table. The bill didn't matter. Nothing about the bill mattered anymore. Linda stood too. Where are you going? Home. We need to talk. We're done talking. I started walking toward the exit. She followed me. Russell. I stopped outside the restaurant and turned around. One final question. Does Jacob know you're having this conversation? Linda froze, just for a second. But it was enough. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what I thought. Then I walked away. And before I even reached my truck, I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to find out exactly how much they had been hiding. The drive home took 20 minutes. I spent the entire ride thinking about one thing, not whether Linda was cheating. That question had already been answered. The real question was how deep it went. When I got home, Emma was spending the night at my parents' house. We'd planned that days earlier because of the anniversary dinner. For the first time all evening, I was grateful for the timing. I walked inside and headed straight for my office. Linda arrived about 15 minutes later. She came through the front door looking angry. Running away doesn't solve anything. I looked up from my desk. I'm not running. Then why did you leave? Because I don't enjoy celebrating my anniversary while my wife asks for permission to sleep with another man. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I pointed toward the hallway. Go upstairs. What? You heard me. Russell, go upstairs. We will talk tomorrow. Something in my tone made her stop arguing. She turned and walked away. The second I heard the bedroom door close, I got to work. I wasn't interested in speeches. I wanted facts. Over the years, Linda and I shared access to most financial accounts. I opened our banking records. At first, everything looked normal. Then I found a savings account I didn't recognize. The account wasn't hidden particularly well. It was simply an account I'd never had a reason to look at before. My stomach tightened. I opened it. $38,000, transferred over several months. Small amounts, never enough to attract attention. But together, it was a serious amount of money. I kept digging, and then I found something else. A series of transfers linked to an account belonging to Jacob. I stared at the screen. Once could have been a mistake. Twice, maybe. 7 times wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. I downloaded everything, every statement, every transfer, every date. Then I checked phone records. What I found there was worse. Hundreds of calls, late-night conversations, hours of phone time while I was working, while I was traveling, while I thought my wife and my best friend were simply staying in touch. Around midnight, I found the final piece. A reservation confirmation. A cabin outside Austin. Booked 3 weeks earlier. 2 names attached. Linda and Jacob. 3 days. Not 1 night. 3 days. I sat back in my chair. The picture was complete now. This wasn't an affair that got out of control. This wasn't some emotional mistake. They were preparing for something. Preparing to leave. Preparing for a future. And judging by the money trail, they expected me to help fund it without even knowing. I looked toward the ceiling where Linda was sleeping. Then I looked back at the documents on my screen. For the first time that night, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because they had just made a very expensive mistake, and neither of them knew it yet. The next morning, I acted like nothing had changed. That was the hardest part. Not because I wanted answers. I already had them. The hard part was letting Linda believe I didn't. She came downstairs around 8. Careful. Watching me. Trying to read my face. I was making coffee. Are we going to talk? She asked. We will. When? Soon. She frowned. That wasn't the reaction she expected. She expected anger, an argument, maybe begging. Instead, I grabbed my keys. I have things to do. Then I left. My first stop was a lawyer's office. His name was Gregory Barnes, a sharp man with 25 years of family law experience. I spent 2 hours showing him everything: the affair, the money transfers, the cabin reservation, the phone records. When I finished, Gregory leaned back. "You're telling me she moved money while planning a relationship with your friend?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He nodded slowly. "Good thing you came before confronting them." "What do you mean?" "It means you're still in control." That was exactly what I wanted. Control. Not revenge. Not drama. Control. Over the next week, Gregory helped me move carefully. Every action was legal. Every step documented. I separated finances, protected business assets, secured important records, prepared custody documentation involving Emma. Meanwhile, Linda and Jacob thought they were ahead. I knew because they got careless. Very careless. 3 days later, I saw Jacob at a neighborhood barbecue. He walked over carrying a beer, acting normal. "Everything good?" he asked. I looked him directly in the eye. Couldn't be better. The confidence on his face almost made me laugh. He thought I was clueless. He thought he was winning. A few days later, I made 2 phone calls. One to Linda, one to Jacob. I told them both the same thing. "Be at my house Friday at 7. We need to settle this." Neither asked many questions. They both showed up. Jacob arrived first. Linda arrived 5 minutes later. I invited them into the dining room, the same room where we'd celebrated birthdays, Christmas dinners, Emma's school achievements. I sat at the head of the table. They sat across from me, confused, waiting. I slid a thick folder across the table. "What is this?" Linda asked. "Open it." She did. The color immediately drained from her face. Jacob reached over. The moment he saw the documents, his expression changed too. Bank statements, transfers, call logs, photos, reservation records, everything. The room went completely silent. Then I leaned back in my chair and finally said the words I'd been waiting all week to say. "Now let's stop pretending." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Linda kept turning pages. Jacob stopped after the first few documents. There was no point continuing. The evidence was overwhelming. Finally, Jacob cleared his throat. "Russell, I can explain." I laughed. "No, you can't." He shifted in his chair. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "Interesting choice of words." I pointed at the cabin reservation. "You booked a 3-day trip." Then I pointed at the bank records. "You moved money." Then at the call logs. "You spent hundreds of hours talking." I looked directly at him. "Tell me exactly which part wasn't supposed to happen." Jacob had no answer. Linda finally spoke. "We never wanted to hurt you." That almost made me angry. Almost. Instead, I stayed calm. "You didn't accidentally hurt me." I tapped the folder. "You planned this." Neither argued, because they couldn't. I pulled another folder from beside my chair and placed it on the table. Linda stared at it. "What is that?" "Divorce papers." Her face immediately changed. For the first time all week, she looked genuinely scared. "Russell, wait." "No. We can still fix this." I shook my head. "No, Linda. You wanted another future. Go have it." She started crying. I didn't. I was done with emotions. This was business now. Emma's future mattered more than my feelings. Jacob stood up. "Maybe I should go." "Good idea." He hesitated, then tried one final time. "I never wanted us to end like this." I stood up too. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Then you should have remembered you were my friend." Jacob lowered his eyes. A minute later, he was gone. Linda stayed. "Please don't do this." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from me. Not because she'd changed overnight, because I finally saw who she was. "I didn't do this." I slid the divorce papers toward her. "You did." The following week, everything moved fast. Linda moved into an apartment. The divorce filing became official. Emma stayed with me, and then the consequences started spreading. Jacob worked as a financial advisor. Most of his biggest clients had come through introductions from people I knew. Those people learned what happened. One by one, they left. Within 2 months, his business was bleeding. Linda's situation wasn't much better. Friends stopped inviting her places. People became distant. The life they thought they were building together was already starting to crack. And the worst part for them? I hadn't lifted a finger. Their own choices were doing all the damage. 3 months after the divorce filing, I got the call. Not from Linda, from her older sister, Rebecca. We'd always gotten along, and she still checked in occasionally because of Emma. "Have you heard what's happening?" she asked. "No." There was a pause. "Jacob and Linda are falling apart." That didn't surprise me. "What happened?" Rebecca let out a tired sigh. "A lot." After the call ended, I learned the rest through mutual friends. The relationship that had seemed so exciting in secret looked very different in public. When there were no lies to hide behind, reality took over. Bills, arguments, pressure, consequences. Everything they had ignored finally caught up with them. Then another detail surfaced. A big one. Jacob hadn't been nearly as financially secure as he'd claimed. In fact, he'd been carrying substantial debt for over 2 years. Debt Linda never knew about. Debt he'd carefully hidden. A few weeks later, Linda requested a meeting. Through her attorney, I agreed to meet at a coffee shop, public place, neutral ground, nothing more. When I arrived, Linda was already sitting there. She looked different, not broken, just tired. Life had clearly caught up with her. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" "No." "Come on, Russell." I shook my head. "I knew actions have consequences. That's different." She stared down at her coffee. "Jacob lied to me." I almost laughed. The irony was hard to miss. "He lied to me too." She nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked up. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I believed she meant it, but it didn't change anything. "Probably." Her eyes watered. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" She didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer. You can't rebuild trust after you deliberately destroy it. Eventually, she asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you think we could ever start over?" The answer came immediately. "No." Not angry, not emotional, just honest. Linda closed her eyes. A few seconds later, she nodded, like she already knew. We finished the conversation discussing Emma. Nothing else mattered. When we stood up to leave, she stopped me. "Despite everything, you're a good father." I looked at her for a moment. That's the one job I couldn't afford to fail. Then I walked away. And for the first time since that anniversary dinner, I felt completely free. Not because I'd won, because I had finally stopped looking backward. The custody hearing took place 8 months after our anniversary. By then, most of the drama had burned itself out. What remained were facts, and facts mattered. My attorney, Gregory Barnes, had spent months preparing. Every school record, every medical appointment, every activity, every weekend schedule, everything involving Emma was documented. Not because I was trying to punish Linda, because I wanted stability for my daughter. The courtroom was quiet when the hearing began. Linda sat across from me beside her attorney. She looked nervous. I didn't. I knew what I'd done over the previous 8 months. I'd shown up, every day. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Work schedules, financial records, living arrangements, statements from Emma's teachers, recommendations from the family evaluator. Hours passed. When it was finally over, the judge delivered her decision. Primary custody would remain with me. Linda would receive regular visitation and shared parental rights, but Emma's primary residence would stay in my home. That was the outcome I'd hoped for. Not because I wanted to defeat Linda, because Emma deserved consistency. Outside the courthouse, Linda approached me. There were no tears this time, no arguments, just acceptance. "I'm glad Emma has you," she said. I nodded. "And she needs you too." For a second, she looked surprised. Maybe she expected bitterness. Maybe she expected me to enjoy the result. I didn't. Emma having a healthy mother in her life was still important, no matter what had happened between us. That evening, I picked Emma up from school. She ran toward my truck carrying a drawing she'd made. "Dad, look!" I unfolded the paper. It showed our house, me, Emma, our dog, Cooper, everybody smiling. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it's perfect." She grinned and climbed into the passenger seat. As I drove home, I realized something. A year earlier, I'd been fighting to save my marriage. Now, I wasn't fighting at all. I was building something better. Not perfect, not the life I'd planned, but real. And after everything that had happened, real was worth more than perfect ever was. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Linda. I wasn't thinking about Jacob. I was thinking about the future, and that was exactly where my focus belonged. Exactly 1 year after that anniversary dinner, I found myself sitting in the same restaurant, same building, same corner of the city, different life. This time, Emma sat across from me. She was busy studying the dessert menu like it was the most important document in the world. "Dad, can I get the chocolate cake?" "You already know the answer," she smiled. "So, that's a yes." "You know it is." The waiter laughed and walked away. I leaned back and looked around the restaurant. A year earlier, I had walked into that place believing my future was secure. Then Linda had looked across the table and said the sentence that changed everything. "I want a night with Jacob." At the time, it felt like the end of my life. It wasn't. It was the end of an illusion. There's a difference. The truth was that my marriage had already been broken before that dinner. I just hadn't known it yet. That night didn't destroy my family. The choices leading up to it did. Emma interrupted my thoughts. "Dad? Yeah? You okay?" I smiled. Never better. And for once, it was completely true. The previous year hadn't been easy. I'd lost a wife, lost a best friend, lost the future I thought I was building. But I'd gained something too. Clarity, self-respect, peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you stop chasing explanations and start accepting reality. Linda was rebuilding her life. From what I heard, she was doing better. Jacob had moved to another state after his business collapsed. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. I didn't plan to. Some chapters are better left closed. The desserts arrived. Emma immediately attacked the chocolate cake. I laughed, the same laugh that had been missing from my life for a long time. As we finished dinner and headed toward the parking lot, Emma slipped her hand into mine. Simple, natural, trusting. The evening air was cool. The city lights stretched across the distance. For a moment, I stood there looking back at the restaurant. A year ago, I had walked out of those doors feeling betrayed. Tonight, I walked away feeling grateful, not for what happened, but for what I learned. Some men spend years living inside a lie because they're afraid of the truth. I got the truth all at once. It hurt. Then it set me free. Emma squeezed my hand. "Come on, Dad." I smiled. "Coming." Then we walked toward the truck together. And this time, when I drove away from that restaurant, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was driving towards something better. Thank you for watching.